A very good morning and thank you so much for having taken the time to have joined today's webinar. My name is Jay. I'm with the product development team here at ManageEngine. I'm with the IT security and identity access management team to be precise. So we are going to have an interesting session today, and that being said, I want to make sure that you are able to hear me loud and clear and you're able to see my screen as well clearly. So this is when I'm going to take your help, the time when I take your help. I want you guys to help me out with a quick audio video check. We've got an interesting session planned ahead. I'm pretty sure you guys have grabbed your cup of coffee and also have a notepad ahead for today's webinar. Let's start with a quick audio video check, guys. I'm going to take your help right now. If you can hear me loud and clear, okay, all right, I'm going to say 1 2 3, and when you hear me say 1 2 3, you can drop me a message on the chat saying great. 1 2 3, can you hear me? You can drop a message to me on chat right now. If you hear me say 1 2 3, you can say great on chat. 1 2 3, check, audio check. We've got the webinar scheduled for the day. We're going to be talking about passwords. We're going to be talking about security. And lovely, thank you so much, guys. I've got my confirmation. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, guys. It's awesome to have you over. Perfect. The audio seems to be working perfectly fine. And a quick question again: the video. Are you able to see my screen clearly? Because I am going to be running through a couple of slides that are going to help us understand the concept today. We are going to be talking about password security. We're going to be talking about usability. The idea is to strike the balance here. So before we get started, a quick check on the video. Oh, lovely. Once again, thank you, guys. The audio and video seems to be perfectly working fine. Now, that being said, no wait. Today's session is going to be an interesting session, one on enterprise password management. The idea behind putting together this webinar is based on the inspiration that we had in one of our conferences, because all that we administrators want is to ensure that our organizations have the best in class security. All right, that's everybody's wish, that's everybody's dream, no doubt about that. But who are organizations made of? They are made of employees, they are made of users, they are made of people. And the security of the organization is only as strong as the weakest link. And you must have by this time guessed who the weakest link are. Obviously, it's our users. Irrespective of how hard you try, you have the best in class SIAM solution or a security solution that's got a machine learning algorithm in it, this, that, all of that. Still, you're going to have users who are going to write their passwords on a piece of paper and have it stuck right on top of their desktop. What do we do about that? So the session essentially is to build a culture of better usability, just so that your users don't resort to taking advantage of a poor password management policy. That is that's been happening all along. We talk about the big identity and access management solutions that have been out there for a very, very long time. Let's take Active Directory for that matter. Very old, almost as old as 20 years. How fail-safe is the password policy that Active Directory has to offer? Likewise, if we keep talking about it, there's a lot around how security gets handled in organization, and primarily the reason for falter is our users and how they try to handle a situation, especially when it comes to password security. Because now, come on, we'll have to understand that our users also undergo a level of password fatigue. They manage multiple applications, or they do not essentially manage but use multiple applications. They tend to keep it simple for themselves. They would probably resort to having a weak password for all of the applications, or probably have one password for all of these applications. So that makes it really, really difficult for administrators to kind of pinpoint from where to start if there's something gone wrong. So when we look at this, it seems absolutely normal. From the outside, you've set the best procedures, you've got all of it in place. It seems like a perfectly happy organization. Everything is smooth as long as an attacker creeps in. The moment an attacker is in your system, even before you know, a lot of problem can pop up. And when I say attacker, please do understand that it not necessarily be only someone from outside your company. It can very well be an insider. And given the fact that insiders have more privileges than outsiders, they know the ins and outs of the organization. They in fact know the behavioral pattern of your users. They study them so much closely that they know when they step into work, when does an user leave, when do they go for a coffee break. All of that is very well known for these attackers that we are talking about, be it an insider or an outsider. They can socially engineer your users to give away critical credentials. This is what is happening, and it's plaguing a lot of organizations. And in fact, Microsoft came clean. A while ago, Microsoft had published this infographic. It came around the time when they were hosting their Ignite conference. Come on now, Microsoft has been honest, which is a good thing. The moment just one account on your system or your infrastructure or your Active Directory gets compromised, it takes not more than 2 days for an attacker to get into your system, crack into the domain admin, and even before you know, they have control of your entire system. But then guess what's the striking part right here? They don't want to cause damage right away, because security solutions these days are definitely designed to contain such a damage, such a threat. But what they do is they wait it out. They try to do an internal recon. They understand what are the critical resources. They understand where are your critical files. It could be intellectual property that they're after. It could be probably defamation that they're after. It could be any such motive, and they take time. They take solid time, and based on the research that Microsoft has done, it seems they take at least 5 months before they actually get caught, or if someone's able to even trace that. Being caught is the second part of the story. What about them being just traced? It takes such a long time. So what I would request, or what I would suggest to administrators, is quite basic: a change in perspective. A change in perspective to how you handle security, be it passwords or be it anything for that matter. A change in perspective in such a way that you start considering the possibility of what if an attacker is already present in your system. Now, this is very scary. That's because it's becoming quite obvious. It's going to take some time for you to actually figure out that there's an attacker in your system. So what's the guarantee that you have that there's no one right now in your system? And based on the trends that we see, it's all the more striking for us. All these infographics are disturbing. Sorry guys, but then this is how it is. We've got attacks that are happening day in, day out. Our users falling victim for something as old and archaic as a phishing attack. By this time, your users should definitely know what mail to open and what email to not to open. But then again, users are users. What can you do about it? Because I'm pretty sure if one of your users receives an email that says do not open the email, what's the first thing that they do? They open the email, and when it has an attachment that says do not download, what do? The obvious, they download. So they can very well be socially engineered, because there have been instances in the past. There have been so many cases in the past, like the famous Nigerian scam. There have been senior employees in the organization, all right, quite senior in the organization, who fell prey for incidences like this. It could be tempting for a few people, for just the heck of it, or probably out of curiosity, they'd probably open an email, they'd probably respond to one. And in fact, these attackers are quite trained, I would say, to socially engineer. They know their lingo, they know business, they talk as if they are being honest about the deal that they want to strike. They talk as if, or they pretend real good, they have a good cover, they go on to establish a conversation and a long relationship. In fact, we've had instances where one of our customers went on talking over to another attacker without realizing they were an attacker in the first place, for months together, finally letting an invoice scam rollout. So we are talking about attackers who can pull this off. So account takeovers become very common, and the first and foremost problem with account takeover essentially is the credentials being compromised. It could be any form of attack. It could be a dictionary attack. It could be a password spray attack. It could be a brute force attack. So how do we contain this? What could probably help us is an idea of how attackers would go through your system. What steps would they be taking to gain access? That's number one. So this is going to help you safeguard your credentials. That's number one. And then what do they intend to do with the credentials that they have? Do they try to establish control? Do they want to understand your environment, take their time, stake it out, and then finally target and get hold of critical corporate data? So like I earlier pointed out, it becomes really easy for them because they've been trained for this. They know how to sound absolutely legitimate. That is the problem, and our users are going to fall prey for it. There have been so many scams. The CEO fraud scam was rampant about a couple of years back, pretending to be the CEO of a company. It becomes very simple given the fact that you can buy a domain or an email or a website domain quite easily online available. You can spoof so that it looks very similar to an authentic one. So the challenges that we face day in day out are innumerable, and most of the times we need to agree that there is how much we can control. There are certain things that are beyond our control, and that's the reason why we need foolproofing. And it starts with us appreciating the possibility of an attacker being already present and us taking an effort to start monitoring certain things. So I've put together a list of things to look into every single time when you have the opportunity, or if you have a tool, or if you can configure your Active Directory to send out notifications this way. This is going to be quite helpful. Brute force attacks, how do you detect them? So my suggestion to you would be to have a SIM solution in place, one that has a threat intelligence module, one that can in fact even analyze how behaviors are with user objects. So you can do that. A brute force attack, when you look at it, it should be following this pattern: a couple of logon failures, in fact let's say 10 or 15 logon failures in a very short span of time, let's say around 30 seconds, followed by one successful logon. And then the user goes on, or the attacker goes on to install a malicious application in one of your servers. So when you look at all of these instances separately, all right, it's going to be 10 logon failures. Okay, that did not raise a red flag. Probably the account got locked out if the threshold was set rightly, or it never really raised a red flag. And then there was one successful logon. You look at it separately, you don't get context. So you would need to look for solutions that can give you context. And when I say context, you can look for solutions that can correlate events. That's something that you can take away today. And then obviously a easy tip for you is going to be non-business hours. I seriously don't know what affinity attackers have towards non-business hours or the middle of the night. So here, most of the times, amateur attackers resort to this way. They try snooping data in the middle of the night, thinking there's nobody around. But then you are aware, you know that most of the attackers behave this way. Or this is the case with most of the insiders. Essentially, when they're disgruntled, when they want to probably take a dig at the organization or cause damage for the organization, they try and do it when no one is around. And in fact, at times they try and do it remotely, thinking that they can get not get caught. So here we need to start analyzing from the attacker's perspective. And an obvious thing that almost every attacker wants is to extend their foothold, get as many number of touch points as possible compromise. So they tend to island hop, for which they need to get that first touch point and compromise one credential, and then they go on compromising one after the other till they get hold of the domain admin. So it becomes very easy for them. You don't need complex, sophisticated tools to find out who are your users. All that they need is a couple of scripts, an LDAP query that could run and give them a list of users, all of them available in your organization. It's accessible. Why? Active Directory is structured that way. An identity access management tool like AD is structured that way. It requires computers to be able to read into AD with a list of all users and their privileges for its architecture. That's how it's structured. And when someone knows this, they can take advantage finding out who are all the users. So this is not a vulnerability, but then you can't do anything about it. It becomes easy for them, and then they start moving laterally through their system, one system at a time, till they get hold of the domain admin. They take privileges. There's privilege escalation through and through. They try and ensure that they don't come under the radar. They do it real slow. Like I told you, they take months together till they reach where they want, and then even before you know, they're out of your system. They've got all they want and they're out of your system. And it's a good thing that organizations have started accepting and acknowledging. We've got statistics. We ran a survey across the world, and we found out that there are 65% of the administrators and executives who fear that their email accounts have been hacked, which means that it's true. A lot of people understand that now. All right, it's worse than before. A while ago it was just your Active Directory to be managed, but now we're talking about applications on the cloud. The number of touch points that a user has is a lot more, or it's far more exponential than how it was before. And in earlier, back in the day, it was a system that you could physically control. You knew the end of it, you knew left, right, center. But then when it comes to how things are in the cloud, the mobility is one thing, right? We're talking about going mobile, being usable, making it simple for the users, letting them use applications on the go, letting them access critical resources on the go. But then what about the security? Are we compromising security at the cost of mobility and usability? That is the question that we want to answer through today's webinar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break things down for you, keep it real simple, and give you action items, things that you can go back and implement right away. It starts with understanding the very fact that the more you make it easier for your users, the lesser are your problems going to be. But then, doesn't it contradict the very idea of also compromising on security? No, not really. If you have a tool that can foolproof you at every juncture where you make it easy for your users, then why worry? That's the whole deal behind today's webinar. We want to see how things can work if we can have the right set of tools in place. It can be something as simple as having an extra layer of authentication, let alone complex passwords, let alone having tools that are intelligent to analyze user behavior. Something as simple as having a second factor of authentication. It would probably take you 30 minutes to even configure this. That's all that would take. So when we're talking about policies, we need to understand that the AD policies aren't good enough. You cannot tell me with conviction that there is not one user out there in your organization who does not have a password that says password at 123. This is a common problem. This is a common problem that must have been addressed a long while ago. Active Directory password policies are almost 18 or 19 years old, but then there's not been a considerable improvement. You've got different options. They've given it to you, but then one has no pros over the others, or there are cons in each of them, and none of it is the final solution. They aren't your go-to solution because they don't help you answer a couple of basic password security questions. Can they prevent incremental passwords? This is the usual user behavior. A user tends to set the first password as, let's say, password at 1. The next obvious password they want to quickly, they can quickly think of is password 2, password 3, password 4. Likewise, this is how users behave. This is a pattern that you can see in any organization among any users. And does Microsoft address this? The answer is no. And when it comes to the granularity aspect of it, it is quite obvious that different types of users require different levels of granularity. When we are talking about administrators, the password essentially needs to be complex. When we're talking about our normal users, okay, at times need not be as complex as the ones for administrators. But can you do that with your Active Directory password policies that aren't already strong? So these are basic questions, and then comes the attacks like a password spray attack. How would you have a system? Do you want to have a system that can detect that? How do you fend yourself from a dictionary attack? And obviously, a very big challenge with Active Directory is the way they notify their users about impending password resets. I'll talk about that in a while. The problem is when it is difficult for our users, okay? The impending problem of password reset, they try to address it. Microsoft tries to address this, with what? A pop-up. And what do our users do when they see a pop-up? The obvious user response to this is they close the pop-up. They never read what's in it. And when was the last time when your user followed a best practice or a guidelines that you gave? So they're still going to find out ways to get around your system. That is the biggest problem. All of this boils down to the simple fact because they want better usability, because they want it to be simple for them, because they are tired of remembering 100 passwords at the same time. They use so many applications, so they resort to the most easiest way, which also unfortunately turns out to be the least secure way. What do we do about this? That is the question right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of easy tips and tricks. It starts with the first one, which is the password policy strengthener. So for long, I'm pretty sure you guys are tired with Active Directory's password policy that was never enough. So what we've done is we've added an extra layer to Active Directory's password policy, and you will be able to allow or disallow users from using certain words. It starts there. What if you can reverse engineer an attack? That's what I'm talking about. What if you can have a dictionary uploaded right into your tool and not let any user use a word from dictionary? Now that is definitely going to change the way how your password security is handled. It's very fundamental. It might sound basic, but dictionary words not being used makes any user think a little harder, make use of special characters. Obviously a couple of lower cases, upper cases, special characters, all of that is obviously going to come into the picture even without you asking them to do so. Not letting them use dictionary words can help you fend yourself from a dictionary attack. So this is what attackers do. They try to make use of an available dictionary that's online. They use a tool like Hydra. They quickly run a dictionary attack. They crack past the system, and like I told you earlier, it just takes 2 days to get your entire system down. Why would you want to have your users use dictionary words? Number one, so you can use the same dictionary that an attacker uses. It's available online. Just do a quick Google search, you will be able to find out. It's that simple, and you can upload the dictionary. So what we are working on is we are working on building a dynamic dictionary into the tool. All right, so when it comes to the size of the dictionary, we do not essentially have a restriction. I have Charles asking me this question: how large of a dictionary can be used? There's no restriction in terms of the file. So the one that we offer is about 3 to 4 MB large. It's a list of all words compressed in a text file, so you could very much upload it. But if you have your own dictionary, you can very much do that as well. We do not have a restriction on the size because the database is going to be very much called for from our tool. All right, the tool is going to do the weightlifting for you, so you don't need to worry. The size isn't a showstopper right here. Thank you for the question, Charles. So going forward, we are talking about other best practices with respect to password policy strengthening. What about not letting users use incremental passwords? We were talking about that being a problem, right? I can very much stop them from using any consecutive passwords like this 2 times continuously, a password not having words from the username, or a password not following specific patterns. We have users using patterns all the time. 1 2 3, that's the most common password. Or we call it keyboard waltzing. They start with QWERTY, QWERTY, 1 2 3 4 5. That's something everybody loves to do. It's easy, it's quick, and it's at the same time not very secure. So you can stop your users from using any of those patterns. You can pre-populate them. We are working on an algorithm right now. We're building in machine learning. Sneak peek information for you guys, don't tell anyone. So we're building a machine learning algorithm that can very much have a regex query in place where you could key in a specific pattern, and it can learn from the possible behavior of users and figure out what could be the common password that people use and stop them from using it. So it generates a list of words through learning dynamically. We are building one. We are in process of getting it implemented as well. And then there's a lot of it around using uppercase, lowercase, all of those usual ones. The length of the password. Now this is a big problem. So how do you go forward tackling that? Can an administrator not just have length configured to 20, that is going to change the way how security is done, because passphrases are any day stronger than just passwords. Let me quickly do a Google search for you and show you how adding one extra alphabet or removing one alphabet from the list of passwords changes how easy or how difficult it becomes for an attacker to crack through your system. Just give me one quick second. I'm going to pop open a cool piece of tool that I found online that tells you how secure your passwords are. Just give me one quick second. I'm going to quickly find that for you. Alright, I got it. What I'm doing right now is I'm going to quickly share that link to you on chat. You can have fun. In fact, I'll tell you what, tomorrow you can write an email to your users, okay, giving them access to this tool. The link is going to be on your chat right now. And 3, 2, 1, and there you go. I hope you can see my screen, the screen with the tool that says how secure is my password. So I've given the link to you on the chat. You can quickly write an email to your users. Your users will also realize and at the same time have fun doing this. I'm going to enter my password. Let's see how safe it is. So this is going to be based on Active Directory password policy. Okay. And it says instantly. So I keyed in my existing password, which is based on Active Directory password policy, and it seems it can crack it instantly. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little more difficult. I'm going to add a couple of numbers to it. Okay, I've added one number. I've added one more number. I'm going to add a special character followed by a case alteration. All that I had to do was number, special character, case change, and it becomes 34,000 years. And as you must have noticed, the longer that the password becomes, the more difficult. Not just it's not just going to be factors of 1 or twice or thrice. It's going to be exponential. I'm just going to add one more character, making it impossible for it to be cracked. So I recommend administrators should be using passphrases, and this option is quite effective. So override all complexity rules if the password length is going to be 20. That is something that I recommend. So users can very much do it. So they can always resort to writing creative passphrases that they can remember. So we are talking about being able to do all of this. Okay, must contain uppercase, must contain lowercase, how many special characters should be there, does this granularity come with your password policy, is the question right here. And then it doesn't stop right there, because we were talking about usability, right? How am I going to communicate it to my users that this is going to be the password policy that you need to follow? As simple as this. Why not tell them right where they set their passwords? Why not give them a heads up saying, here is the list of rules that you need to adhere to. This is something that we do day in, day out. Why not do it on Active Directory as well? So give them a prompt. Tell them how secure their passwords are. Give them a prompt. We have a security meter. So as a user types their password, it's going to prompt them with a red if the password is not strong enough, with a yellow if the password is moderately strong, with a brown if it's good, and with a green if it's perfect. So we give them that suggestion. The visual cue helps a lot. Make it easy for your users, and as they type through, also give that checkbox right there that says, okay, you've satisfied this, and this. Now your password is secure. You do this for your users, you're not going to have a problem, or neither are they going to crib about not being able to set the right password. So this solves the problem, because if you do the Microsoft way, it just tells that you're wrong. It doesn't tell you where you went wrong. And when it comes to users, why just bother or be concerned about the users inside your organization? What about that huge chunk of workforce that is outside your organization? What about users on the go? What about telecommuters? What about your sales reps? What about people working from home? We see a major shift in how organizations are being structured from home, structured on the whole. So we see this, and that being the case, here's one catch for you guys. How would you handle a password problem for a user who's on the go? Can an administrator just pick up the phone and solve a password problem for a user on the go? Most of the time, it turns out it's not going to be possible, because the user is not connected to the office network or the LAN for that matter, and it becomes difficult. An admin cannot initiate a change right there, and that's where we will need usability coming into the picture, making it simple for our users, giving them the same level of experience that a user in-house would have, that a user on-premise would have. Give them a button, simple as that. People like button, they're going to push it, it's going to say reset unlock, it's very straightforward, nothing difficult right here, and then they're going to be prompted open with a window from where they can initiate the password change. Now you are wondering how. That's because there's a VPN connection that gets established back to your Active Directory. The tool does this for you. All the hard work and the weightlifting is taken care, it's encrypted, no worries. All that the user on the go needs to do is to just be connected to the internet. Even if they forget their password, it's absolutely okay. They can initiate a reset because the tool, the VPN, you need not open your laptop or unlock your laptop for the user to be able to connect to it. It happens in the background, it's taken care of by the product. The cache credentials get overwritten and the user gets a successful logon. It saves a lot of trouble. And since we are talking about users on the go, we do not want them to compromise our security by accessing Wi-Fi from a Starbucks. We would want it to be secure, and we've got a VPN to address that. And when we come when you're talking about support, there's Cisco, there's FortiClient, there's Global VPN and whatnot, and you can configure your own ones as well. That has never been a problem. So you could very much do that, and it's straightforward. And yes, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to show you something in a bit, which is the new functionality that we brought in, the functionality that can completely change the password security game. With this in place, with all the conviction, I can tell you it's okay even if your passwords are compromised. How is that? What if you can bring two-factor authentication for the very first logon, or for every logon that a user does onto their laptop or their desktop or to their endpoints or their workstations? It becomes that simple. And two-factor, when I say, is going to be quite effective because we've given you a lot of options. It need not be a security email that you receive. It need not be a text message that you receive. It can very well be a touch ID or a face ID that you could very much use. That is what we mean when we say usability and security can go hand in hand. We are talking about a very personalized factor of authentication like face or touch being used to authenticate a user's logon onto Active Directory or any other system for that matter. This is how it works. So an administrator is trying to log in, okay? If an attacker were to have cracked the administrator's credential, they're going to have a great day. But then, when the system has this provision in place, they'll not be able to go any further because they will need to provide the one-time verification code that they receive over email. That's this verification I've set right here. I've received the email, I'm quickly checking my phone for the email, I'm opening the OTP and then going forward, keying that in, punching that in onto my system, giving my system the verification that it's asking me for, and saying continue for me to get successful access into my Active Directory, or sorry for that matter, my system, whoever that is, be it the administrator or be it a common user. So every server can be protected this way. Every login into a critical server can be protected with a two-factor authentication. So you would definitely want to implement this, and it can bring your security score really, really high. Right? As we are talking about usability, it's also sensible to acknowledge the hardship that our users are going through. They're using a lot of applications. They tend to resort to easy means of setting a weak password that they always do, and here it can become all the more worse if they have that same weak password for across systems. So you have our system strengthen the complexity of it, and at the same time also go on to use a tool that lets them log into any of those applications from a single window. So all these applications and more applications, whichever ones that you want to configure, SAML 2.0 or any other authentication, we support most of them. You can configure them for single sign-on. Be very granular right here as well and say which user gets access to what application. It can be based on OUs, it can be based on groups, it can be based on individual users, it can be based on modules or business units that you create. Absolutely possible. Give them the provision to single sign-on. Set password policies that are very contextual to a business unit or a case, and then let them access the application. How cool would it be when your user has to log in onto their workstation. Right after a second factor of authentication after password, they do that. Let's say it's Face ID. They get in, and then right when they log in, they are going to have access to all the applications because NTLM SSO is enabled. So all that they need to do is get a very strong password in place. What you need to do is get a strong password policy in place. The tool helps you do that. Next one is to have the second factor of authentication. It becomes almost foolproof, and that's what you'd want. And as we go through, we would also want to ensure one thing, right? We would want to save ourselves from password problems, and the biggest of all password problems is users forgetting to reset an impending password. So what do? We've tried all possible ways. It's never worked out. You send in you send a Microsoft notification, the pop-up, it's not going to work out. Instead, what if you can communicate about their password reset that's pending through an email, through a message, through a text, or a push for that matter, and not just once, but how many ever times you see fit, or till they go on to do it for you. So you could set the timer accordingly. You can notify them 1 week ahead, you can notify them 1 month ahead, you can notify 3 days, 1 day, on day 0 you could do that. It could be for password expiration, or it could be for account lockout. You could very much do that, and it makes life easy. In fact, we've had numbers that prove that way. So we've got organizations that have implemented the password expiry notification. This is absolutely free, guys. Trust me, we're giving it away for free. I would want you to write to me right after the webinar at the end so that I can give you the link to download. It's a free tool. You can install it in a couple of minutes. It has no restrictions to it. As many number of users you want, you can have them configured. You can also have restrictions, or you can also have filters based on OUs and groups and say who gets more notifications. You can configure whichever message you want, custom messages, notifications. You can have people copied on the email. You could do whatever you want as long as you get the job done. Here the job gets done because you can notify them omni-channel, not just on one platform, on a text, on an email, on a push, and your user is never going to forget another password reset. What does it help you do eventually? Reduce the call volume to your help desk. On an average, a user calls the help desk about 21 times. This is statistics based on our research. And of these calls, 30% of them turn out to be calls for password reset. Why would you want to trouble yourself with that? In an organization with 500 employees, almost 3,000 calls every year are going to be for password resets. Instead, you could save that huge chunk of money and also achieve a lot more, such as securing access for any system right after a second factor of authentication, having extra layer of password security, having a dashboard for single sign-on at not compromising the usability also. So security and usability are going to go hand in hand, and that can happen with ADSelfService Plus. So does it stop right there? Is it just about making passwords secure? Are attackers going to stop or give up? It seems they are not going to give up. That's how it's always been. They're still on the roll. How can we curtail them? You could do this implementation. We've brought in something called as adaptive authentication. That's the next technology that everybody is talking about. This is the buzz in the industry: contextual or adaptive authentication. What if you can validate every single logon uniquely? What if every user gets a risk score right at the logon? So every time when a logon happens, your system is going to dynamically evaluate the possibility of the user being a threat. So it's going to intelligently figure this out because there's a user behavior analytics module operating on the background that goes on to monitor user activity on a daily basis, draws a baseline for every user as a normal behavior, and when there's deviation, it's going to step in, make it difficult for the user, throw more challenges at the user for the user to prove that he or she is who they claim to be, and then let them log into the system. So we're talking about a real-time intelligence right here, helping you, being by your side to evaluate every single logon event, protecting your organization from an anomalous behavior. So we're talking about factors like geography, we are talking about factors like IP reputation, it could be the device footprint that we're talking about, it could be multiple such parameters. We've got about 12 different parameters of that sort being taken into account when a risk score gets drawn for an user. If there's any deviation on any one of these contexts, then what we're going to do is we're going to make the logon real difficult. Extra factors of authentication are going to pop up. Security questions, second factor, OTP can be configured, a touch or face ID can be configured, and at the same time, rolling it out real soon. I'm guessing we're going to be rolling out for the last quarter. We're saving the good piece for the end of the year. And yes, this question keeps popping up in our mind. Recently, there's a lot of word going around about going absolutely passwordless. Is that going to be possible? You can ask yourself, and the answer is going to be, like I mentioned, yes and no. Going passwordless is going to be a lot more time consuming process. It's going to be a slow process. It's not going to be possible because the consistency in experience between desktop and mobile is the challenge. What if there's no internet? What are we going to do about that? Because when it comes to passwordless authentications, internet at times turns out to play important role. And yes, authentication factors also need to be more stronger, they need to be more foolproof. So when it comes to doing it password plus second factor, there's a factor of knowledge involved, and there's a factor of possession involved. Knowledge being the knowledge that you hold of what your password is, and very much be possible, but then it's going to take time. We definitely need to think of better authentication algorithms to get there. And that being said, what we want to do is I've put together a couple of resources. I've written 3 books right here, and these books are essentially going to help you defend against password problems. One is an exclusive ebooks on password attacks, so please do drop me a message right now. I'd love to share that ebook. We've given you tips and tricks for you to configure password policies accordingly, and a couple of other security best practices that you could take to save yourself from the most common password attacks. Trust me, it's quite simple. It's just a 3-page book. You could very much go through it in like 5-10 minutes and get those best practices implemented right away. There are 2 other books too. Please make use of the resources. We'd love to share them over to you. So it's about you making the call right here. It's very obvious. Security threats are always on the rise. The native tools are kind of handicapped most of the instances. So we would want to be by your side as you take it against the security threats and attackers. It's going to be quite simple. Usability is definitely our priority as we are trying to make it easy for our users, and at the same time not at the cost of security, because we've got foolproofing all through. Guys, you've been wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. You've been wonderful. If you have questions, I'm going to be around to take your questions. If you have any specific questions, please point them out to me right away so that I can have them addressed right now. And if you want the copy of the webinar, you could very much write to me. jreddy@manageengine.com is my email ID. I'm available for other questions. We work constantly and consistently with identity security. We're working with big names, government agencies, and a lot more in figuring out what's the future of identity security. And yes, we'd love to work with you to understand where or what you think is the future of identity security. I'd love to know, guys. You can write to me at jreddy@manageengine.com. And yes, the video is available. Got questions? Drop a message right now. Cheers, guys. You have a good one.